Hello.
Imagine being discriminated against for something you had absolutely no control over, such as your gender or mental state. In my favorite short story, The Yellow Wallpaper, the narrator faces both of these discriminations from her husband, family, and society. The Yellow Wallpaper was written in a journalized format and sheds light on inequality against women in the 19th century. It depicts a wife's struggle with postpartum depression. This illness is suggested in the text, and yet I cannot be with him. It makes me too nervous, speaking about her newborn child. Conflict arises in the narrator's life when she is isolated into a nursery decorated by yellow wallpaper by John, her husband and physician. Events such as childbirth can prove very traumatic to some women. Symptoms such as psychic numbing, flashbacks, hallucinations, and nightmares may occur. This is very apparent within the yellow wallpaper as the narrator obsesses over a woman she believes is trapped behind the yellow wallpaper. The narrator is secluded to a large room with barred windows, a bed nailed to the ground, and of course, the yellow wallpaper, which she describes as smoldering, unclean yellow, strangely faded by the slow-turning sunlight. She divulges in her journal her husband's remedies. So I take phosphates or phosphites, whichever it is, and tonics, and journeys, and air, and exercise, and am absolutely forbidden to work until I am well again. This illustrates isolation and the degrading of the narrator during her battle against postpartum depression. The narrator's struggle in the yellow wallpaper actually mirrors the author's life. Charlotte Perkins Gilman married at age 24 to Charles Walter Stinson, and a quick year later, they had their only daughter, Catherine. Depression struck at the beginning of their marriage, and Stinson convinced his wife to write a letter explaining her symptoms to Dr. S. Wire Mitchell, who was a specialist in women's nervous diseases. Mitchell decided to take Gilman on as a patient, and treatments started quickly. Isolation, physical inaction, massage, mild electric stimulation, and fattening centered on the body as a site of health and disease. Gilman also had to give up all dreams of a career. She was never to write or paint again, and she was never to read for more than 2 hours a day. As read throughout the text, John's treatment of his wife mirrors that of Dr. Wire Mitchell's breast cure. Gilman agreed to the treatments until experiencing a mental breakdown and fled to a family friend's home with her daughter, Catherine. Gilman and her husband eventually divorced, and Catherine lived with her husband and his new wife. This stirred up great controversy. The press attacked her as an unnatural mother abandoning her child. Gilman's undergoing of the brutal claims gives great insight to why the narrator developed such an anxiety toward her child. The yellow wallpaper also sheds light on inequality inside marriages. It gives many examples of discrimination and disrespect. The husband is represented as a typical man in the beginning. John is practical in the extreme. He has no patience with faith, an intense horror of superstition, and he scoffs openly at any talk of things not to be felt and seen and put down in figures. This insensitive husband has countless conversations with his wife when he puts down her opinions and mocks her. John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in a marriage. And John doesn't know how much I really suffer. He knows there is no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him. These two quotes are prime examples of the wife's feelings of inferiority. Within her journal, she explains great feelings of shame and explains herself as a nuisance to her husband. Eventually, this turns into great anger and spite toward her husband. He asked me all sorts of questions too, and pretended to be very loving and kind, as if I couldn't see through him. Eventually, she gets fed up with the lack of equality, and her illness provokes a dramatic and rebellious action to reach her husband. As the nanny tries to get her out of the room, she locks herself in. She rips down the wallpaper and releases the woman that she sees. Her husband tries to get her out, but eventually she opens the door, and at the end of the story, it's unclear if she kills or injures him. I don't want to go out, and I don't want to have anybody come in till John comes. I want to astonish him. The Yellow Wallpaper is a splendid piece of feminist literature and entices readers with its unique perplexity. It magnifies issues of inequality of women in the 19th century and treatments of mentally ill women. I strongly recommend this short story.
Mm-hmm.